Now, as we continue with this conversation, 2 weeks after James Braddock had upset Max Baer, Joe Louis would make his New York debut. New York's Madison Square Garden would be against Primo Carnera. Joe Louis stood 6 foot 1.5 inches, weighed 196 pounds. He had a 76-inch reach. He was a heavyweight. He was 21 years old. Primo Carnera was 28 years old. He stood 6 foot 5.5 inches. He was a heavyweight and had an 85-inch reach. He had a record of 82 wins, 7 losses, and 65 knockouts. Joe Louis had a record of 19 wins and 15 knockouts. Joe Louis could punch. Joe Louis had taken on Roy Laser, who's a Jewish heavyweight out of New Jersey, Lee Ramage, and Nady Brown. Primo Carnera taking on Cecil Seal Harris, Victorio Campolo, Ray Ampalatia, Max Baer, and his only title defense would be against Tommy Loughran, who was the Philly Phantom. That fight net gate, $275,531.87. It would gross $378,655. That's the kind of revenue Joe Louis would earn. Joe Louis would deck the Ambling Elf with a beautiful fast right combination. The promoter Mike Jacobs would make his first professional promotional gate with Joe Louis the Brown Bomber. Joe Louis had a 3-fight deal with Mike Jacobs. Show you how shrewd Mike Jacobs was. He was giving Joe Louis cash money under the table. Told him to go buy yourself something nice. Joe, go take out this young lady here. And he was making Joe Louis trust him. And Joe Louis thought he was a swell guy. Because Mike Jacobs wanted Joe Louis to re-sign the contract. Got him to do that without his management team. And this time Joe Louis would sign for the rest of Mike Jacobs' promotional life. You know, what's amazing is how corrupt this sport is. One of the greatest sports in athletics, but it is a corruptible sport. I can share stories with you about things that happen in boxing that I'd rather not share because it's sad. You had 64,000 spectators, 57,000 paid, 7,000 complimentary total tickets. Carnera was paid $86,792.54. Joe Louis was paid $44,636.16. Joe Louis weighed 198 pounds. And he KO'd 210-pound Max Baer with a beautiful left hook combination. New York's Yankee Stadium. Referee was Arthur Donovan. Round after round, the stadium would be in an uproar. 84,831 screaming spectators. He was very shocked, as Louis was a 2-1 betting favorite. Now at the negotiating table, it was agreed that Joe Louis would earn $217,337. And a former world heavyweight champion, Max Baer, would earn approximately $181,114. The rain almost postponed the bout. 45 minutes was delayed. Max Baer began getting cold feet. Joe Louis would marry Marva Trotter earlier that day. It was reported that Max Baer would suffer a broken right wrist and would chip his bone in the left hand, according to Dr. William Haley, an orthopedic surgeon. And this was diagnosed at Johns Hopkins University Hospital, Maryland. Max Baer would be known as the hardest right-hand heavyweight puncher. Before you had Liston, before you had Foreman, before you had Shavers, before you had Deontay Wilder. July 1st, 1935, Lou Ambers would defeat Fritzy Zivik, Hickory Park, and Melville. The very next morning, Ambers would be taken to the hospital, where his jaw would be reset. It'd be wired. Ambers couldn't eat. He could only sip on soup, because that jaw was fractured in 3 pieces. And Fritzy Zivik wasn't known as a devastating puncher, but he knew how to work that ring with his head, his elbow, his shoulders. He knew how to work the ring. He knew how to manipulate the referee. Fritzy Zivik was 22 years old. He had a 71-inch reach, had a record of 33 wins, 6 losses, 4 draws, and 18 knockouts. Lou Ambers was 21 years old, stood 5'4", had a 70-inch reach, had a record of 45 wins, 2 losses, 5 draws, and 15 knockouts. He would lose August 17, 1938 to Henry Armstrong, but he would defeat him August 22nd, 1939 to regain his lightweight championship crown. When he lost to Armstrong on August 17, 1938, Henry Armstrong would become a 3-time champion, 3 different weight divisions. May 7th, 1937, Tony Canzoneri. And May 10th, 1940, Lou Jenkins, the age of 26. Lou Ambers would win his lightweight title from Tony Canzoneri, May 7th, 1937. He would lose his lightweight title, May 10th, 1940, to Lou Jenkins. And not only did he lose it, he was knocked out in 3 rounds. And that never happened to Lou Jenkins. Henry Armstrong was in the ring with Lou Ambers for 30 rounds. Lou Jenkins struck gold, knocking out Lou Ambers, who Henry Armstrong couldn't knock out in 30 rounds. Now, Lou Ambers was born November 8th, 1913, Hickory Hurricane, New York. Died April 25th, 1995. He was 81 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Hickory, New York. I met Lou Ambers. I met Henry Armstrong. I met Jimmy McLaurin. Lou Ambers stood 5'4.5 inches. He was a lightweight and had a 70-inch reach. From 1932 to 1941. Had 104 total bouts, 89 wins, 28 knockouts, 8 losses. And he was stopped twice. He was in a ring with Pedro Martinez and Jimmy McLaurin, Johnny Jadek, Jimmy Vaughn, Henry Armstrong, Sammy Fuller. What a remarkable fighter Lou Ambers was. It was a pleasure to talk to. He really was. He really was. He was something else. Lived to be 81 years of age. Now, Fritzy Zivik had 234 total bouts. He won 159 fights, 65 losses. And he was born May 8, 1913, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's in the Hall of Fame, 1972. Boxing Hall of Fame in 1987. He died May 17, 1984. He was 71 years of age at the time of his death. In Lawrence, Pennsylvania, I had the pleasure of meeting Fizzy Zivic. He stood 5 foot 10 inches. He was a welterweight and fought from 1931 to 1949. October 4th, 1940, he would become the welterweight champion of the world, and when he would dethrone Henry Armstrong. July 29th, 1941, he would defeat Armstrong and he would knock him out in 12 rounds. But then he would lose his title to Freddie Red Cochrane. But he'd be in the ring with Henry Armstrong and Ray Robinson, Charlie Burley, Kid Astacker, Izzy Genazzo, Bob Montgomery, Al Bummy Davis, and Sammy Angot. Who else was he in there with? Freddie Red Cochrane, Jimmy Leto, Jake LaMotta, and Bo Jack, and Luke Jenkins, Charlie Burley, Eddie Booker, Billy Conn, and on and on and on and on. You see, there was a time when boxing was boxing. And these men were fighting each other several times in a month. It was absolutely amazing. Now, Fizzy Zivic had a father by the name of Joseph Zivic. 1899. His mother's name was Mary Capelli. And he had a lot of brothers. Eddie Zivic, 1932 to 1940, who was a lightweight. Joe Zivic, 1918 to 1922, he was a middleweight. Pete Zivic, 1919 to 1929, he was a bantamweight. Jack Zivic, 1919 to 1929, he was a lightweight. And Fizzy Zivic, 1931 to 1949, he was a welterweight. He was known as the Goat Comet. Now, Pete and Jack left their jobs to work. And they would represent the Olympic team. They would own a Doberman pension. That's how you knew what the Zivic household was. The only one to have that dog on the block. But these two men, Pete and Jack, it wouldn't be until Michael and Leon Spinks, where you have fighting brothers on the same Olympic team, both winning gold medals. The Zivics were something else. They really were. And very good fighters they were. But Fizzy Zivic used every tool to his disposal. He would eye gouge you. He would thumb you in the eye. He would headbutt you. He would hit you on the opposite side of the referee. He would claim low blows. He was a dirty fighter. But he knew how to fight. He knew how to fight. He was in there with everyone. That you must give him credit for. July 7th, 1935. Max Schmeling would knock out and defeat Paulino Escudon, 12 rounds, Berlin, Germany. 40,000 screaming spectators in the audience. They would cheer for their hometown hero. And he would cut up Escudon's face to ribbons. It was a bloody mess. He was 5 foot 10 inches. He's from Spain. And he would fight blind. Referee was Arthur Donovan. He would raise the hand of Max Schmeling. Now, Paulino Escudon was 36 years old. He stood 5 foot 10. Had 192 pounds of body weight. Had a record of 49 wins, 15 losses, 3 draws, and 33 knockouts. Max Schmeling was 29 years old. He stood 6 foot 1 inch, weighed 187 pounds, had a 76-inch reach. Had a record of 47 wins, 7 losses, 4 draws, and 33 knockouts. It was for a milk fund. $36,250 will be awarded to Paulino Escudon. Max Schmeling would earn $36,250. It's incredible what fighters were paid during a time of depression. August 7th, 1935. Heavyweight Joe Louis would knock out King Levinsky 1 round. They had to literally drag King Levinsky into the ring. He had a sister who was hyping him up. And King Fitz Levinsky was running that game, man. He was talking some serious business. But he really didn't want to get in that ring. And as he entered the first step, he paused and hesitated. And they had to literally push him up the steps. And he acted like he couldn't get his foot through the rope. It was hooked on the rope and he couldn't get it through the rope, and they had to yank it through, ask him what his problem was. And they saw his knees shaking. And Joe Louis, when the bell rang, went right over to him and hit him with a straight right hand piece. A couple of more punches for good measure and that fight was over. And this fight would take place at Comiskey Park in Chicago. Joe Louis was 21 years old. He stood 6 foot 1.5 inches, weighed 198 pounds, and had a 76-inch reach. Had a record of 20 wins with 16 knockouts. King Fitz Levinsky was 24 years old. He stood 5 foot 11 inches, weighed 198 pounds, had a 74-inch reach, and had a record of 65 wins, 25 losses, and 36 knockouts. The referee was Norman McCarthy. Raised the hand of Joe Louis, Brown Bomber. After 1 round of destruction, 2 minutes and 21 seconds, 40,000 fight fans that came to see Joe Louis, a Detroit power puncher they all heard about. Levinsky pleaded, "Don't let him hit me anymore." His lips were crispy because of the stress, because of the fear that he had for the young Brown Bomber. That's the effect that Joe Louis had on a lot of his opponents. Sonny Liston was that way. Mike Tyson was that way. George Foreman was that way. Lighter division, you had fighters such as Ike Williams. He intimidated a lot of his opponents for the belt even wrong because he was a devastating puncher. August 26, 1935, Lou Salica defeated Cisco Escobar, 15 rounds. It was an upset, and it was a surprise to many. And the reason why this was a surprise, Lou Salica was a very, very good Italian fighter. He was in the 1932 Olympic Games. Harry Wiley Sr. had really guided him. And he would win a bronze medal. One of 5 medals that was won that year. He had 3 bronze and 2 gold. And Lou Salica would defeat Cisco Escobar. He was a very good fighter, was Lou Salica. It's at the Dyckman Oval in Manhattan, 200th Street. They call it Dyckman Street now. Many would know it as Dominican Republic. But they had an oval arena there at one time. It would hold 15,000 spectators. Lou Salica, he lived in Coney Island, New York. Cisco Escobar was the first Puerto Rican champion. They would have a stadium in San Juan, Puerto Rico, named after him. Weighed 118 pounds, he was a bantamweight. Escobar met Pete Scalzo. 12 rounds. August 8th, 1935, both Escobar and Salica were cut. Their bodies were black and blue. Face was bright red. They really hammered each other. Neither man could swallow. They had headaches after that fight. And their face was covered with towels and ice as they left the ring. Lou Salica, who was born November 16, 1912 in Brooklyn, New York. He died January 30th, 2002. He was 89 years of age. at the time of his death, and he would reside in Brooklyn, New York. I had the pleasure of meeting Lou Salica. He stood 5'4". He was a flyweight. 1931, 1944. Had a record of 91 total bouts. 62 wins, 13 knockouts, 17 losses, and 12 draws. 1932. New York Golden Gloves. Metropolitan Champion. Los Angeles Games. It was a flyweight division. National AAU. Italian Amateur Championships. He would take on Richie Lamas, Manuel Ortiz, Small Montana, Midget Wargas, Bobby Pancho. He was 6-1 favorite in that fight. Now, Cisco Escobar was born March 23rd, 1913 in Puerto Rico. He died November 17th, 1979. He was 66 years of age at the time of his passing, and he was managed by Ray Arcel. Stood 5'4". He was a bantamweight. Waddy Bimstein will be part manager. Had a record of 68 total bouts, 43 wins, 19 knockouts, 22 losses, and 3 draws. He'd be in the ring with Baby Casanova, Carlos India. Be in the ring with Joey Archibald and Harry Jaffa, Eugene Hart, Lou Salica. June 26, 1934, he defeated Baby Casanova for the Bantamweight Championship belt, the NBA version of that title. I'm Scrapbook Boxing. Thanks for listening. We'll continue these conversations with more videos to come. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Thanks for listening to me right here on the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. Peace.